Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guest is Nick Chylak. Nick is a 16-year-old Paul is Dead researcher who started looking into the McCartney conspiracy when he was 10. The conversation with Nick is wide-ranging as we discuss many facets of the conspiracy, including who he believes might be the biological father of Billy Shears. And so, without further ado, here's Nick. Well, friends, we have a very special show tonight. As you know, I have been very involved in the Paul is Dead research or the McCartney conspiracy. And about a month ago or so, I was contacted by Nick Chylak, and Nick is going to be our guest this afternoon. And here's the interesting thing about Nick. Nick is 16 years old, and he got started with the Paul is Dead research when he was 10. And I had a call with Nick going back a few weeks ago, and I was very impressed with his knowledge and what he knows and what he has uncovered with regard to the conspiracy. So with that, Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you to take the audience through how you got started with Paul is Dead, because starting at 10, there's a lot of kids that they're doing other things other than researching whether Paul McCartney died or not. So how did you get into it?
So around that time, I was a big Beatles fan. I was watching videos of like Ed Sullivan Show. I was watching their music videos and all sorts of different things. When I noticed this one video of this Ringo is Dead thing, and I watched it, and it was like basically a parody of the Paul's Dead, but they did it with Ringo instead. And I was like, and they mentioned Paul's Dead. I'm like, wait, what's up with that? So I looked up Paul's Dead, and I came across a few videos. Now, at first I didn't believe it, because I'm like, wait, they wouldn't go out of their way to do something as crazy as that. Like, they just wouldn't do that. So I did my own research, and what I found was I found a YouTuber by the name of Phony. Some people may know him as Billy Martin. Some people may know him as Martin with some kind of Danish last name. And I started looking at all these videos, and I saw these Masonic things, these Satanist things, Aleister Crowley, all of the clues. And I'm like, wait, maybe there is something going on. So I did more research, and I found Billy Shepherd. Now, this was before I read the book.
Okay.
I found Billy Shepherd's albums, and I found pictures of him. And you've seen those photos of him before plastic surgery and before he became Paul. And this is still before I read the book. And then I found out about the DNA evidence with Bettina Crispin, and I found about the Japan thing.
When he was arrested.
Yeah, when he was arrested, and the fingerprints.
Yep.
And I found out about all these different things, and I'm like, there's something going on that we don't know about. If you're paying child support for a kid that you know is not yours, that's crazy. If you're going to pay child support, then the kid kind of has to be yours, unless you're doing it out of just generosity. And since Paul was that young, I don't think he was doing it out of generosity. I think he did because he had to. And Bill just felt like finishing making the payments.
Yep.
So now I have the guy that, before he became Paul, I have all these clues. Every single Beatles Paul is Dead clue. I have the backwards masking. I have there's the DNA evidence. There's the studies from the Italian scientist that did the thing on his teeth. There's I'm a Phony, who I'm a Phony is not a single person. I'm a Phony is a corporation that was started in 2007 by a man by the name of Neil Aspinall, who I think everybody may know if you know a lot about the Beatles, who was the road manager of the Beatles and a close friend of the Beatles. As far as I'm concerned, they were supposed to reveal that Paul was dead. They were supposed to do it in 2012. But due to Neil Aspinall dying, they didn't want to make the announcement, and Paul wanted to push it off. Well, who thought was Paul wanted to push it off. Now, I guess they're going to do it when Paul's 90, because Bill Shepherd's like in his 80s now. And everybody thinks he's like in his 70s. So yeah, that's how I pretty much got into all of that.
Okay, so it's very interesting. So at 10 years old, you were interested in the Beatles. Were you listening to Beatle music at the time?
Yes.
Okay, how did you get into the Beatles? Was it your parents?
And basically, my dad, like, he listens to all sorts of music, and one time I heard that my dad was watching a video of them performing Help, and I asked who it was, and he said the Beatles, so I looked it up myself. And I knew who the Beatles were since I was a little kid, but I didn't really get that interest in it till, like, around I was 8 to 10.
Okay, and now you mentioned the book, and you're referring to the Memoirs of Billy Shears. You read that book?
Yes, I read that book.
Okay, and you also mentioned to me when we talked a few weeks back that you've also read a lot of other books, not just that book, right?
Yes, I've read the book on the Italian scientist. I've read, there's all sorts of books. There's like the acrostical readings, which is like the decoding of that. There's Billy's back. There's all different books. Yeah, there's like all different kinds of books, and like they have the different versions of memoirs, plus all these different books by different authors. The memoirs really stuck out to me because memoirs on the book itself, it says that Thomas U. Harriot's the author on the book, but if you go on the website, it claims that Thomas U. Harriot was a ghostwriter, meaning that someone else wrote the book and he published it. And in the book itself and emails and all of these other things, he says that Paul wrote the book, but they're not allowed to legally say that because Paul will go against his contract, and it's for the protection of Tom himself. So they have to pose it as fiction or historical fiction just so they won't get in all of that legal trouble, and Tom will be protected and Bill will be protected. And that's what really stuck out to me about that book.
Yes, and they refer to Tom actually as the encoder of the book, right? So because he's done the encoding.
Yeah, the highlighting.
And there's a lot of encoding in that book. And I'm going to do a video later this month that's going to take the audience through some more of that. Now, when you read Memoirs, Nick, what did you think initially when you first started reading the book? Did you think it was crazy? What did you think?
Well, I've been doing Paul is Dead research for about 6 years. I was probably in my 4th or 5th year of research. So it wasn't too out of the blue for me. Like, I knew what to expect. Yes, it's probably going to be everything I've already known, but there's way more that goes into it that I didn't know. There was way more, and that's what really got me interested in that book. There was so much more that went behind the scenes that we didn't know about. There was so many other people that were involved that we didn't know about.
Right.
And this book really, lets us know what was going on. Like, we knew about the outside information, but this really puts us in the eyes of Bill himself. It puts into his perspective and everything that went on in his life.
That's right. That's what I say to people when they ask about the book, is that the amount of information is extraordinary. It's voluminous. And you're exactly right. You are getting Bill's perspective, as the person that is playing the part of Paul McCartney, how it went down, and all the other stuff that was involved. And in fact, we're going to get into this, I know, because you sent me the list here of topics you want to talk about. We'll get into Freemasonry and Tavistock, which is, in my view, the biggest piece of this whole thing. Now, to get started with the topics, Nick, the first topic you wanted to talk about appears to be the car crash. Now, some people will argue that it wasn't a car crash, it was something else, and so on. So give me your perspective on Paul's death and how did he die. Was it a car crash?
I believe it was a car crash, because if you look into it, Paul's car at the time, people think it's a white Aston Martin. It was actually a dark bluish color version of a Mini Cooper, which, in fact, did get smashed up. It did crash.
Now, how did you find the information on the Mini Cooper? Because a lot of people are not going to know about that.
Well, there are pictures of the car itself smashed up, and you could tell that it is Paul's car because it has the license plate, and the Beatles cars were like signature cars. Like, if you saw that car, you would know it's Paul's. With the photo that I showed you of like the car crash aftermath, Paul, like that white thing, that's the truck. Because in the book it states it was an accident with a car and a truck and a tree, or a pole, where they got slammed up against the pole and it caused this big scene. And now people will speculate that when the Beatles talk about car crash, they're referring to a man by the name of Tara Brown,
right,
that died. But here's the problem with Tara Brown. Yes, he died in a car crash. Yes, he knew the Beatles and he was greatly involved. But not only that, he looked a lot like George Harrison. And as far as I'm concerned, the Beatles would have it that when they would leave, they would get swarmed by girls. So what they would do is they'd put the doubles in so that the girls would swarm the doubles and not the Beatles, so that they could get out of there. Now, Tara Brown was involved in that. When Bill says that he's not the only person that played Paul and that there's many other people, Spencer Davis played Paul. Tara Brown played Paul. There were so many other people that played him, but Bill was the only one with the permanent contract. Now, Tara Brown, there's pictures of him in the 80s with, what's his name? Something Savile?
Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile. There's pictures of him with Jimmy Savile years after he died. So I think he faked his death so that people would speculate that the car crash was actually Tara Brown, not Paul.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand this. You said two things. One, Tara Brown was one of the characters that played Paul McCartney, and a lot of people in the Paul is Dead research community would agree with that. You also mentioned Spencer Davis, and that's a new one for me. So how did you come across Spencer Davis playing that part?
There's a movie called Tara Brown. It's like a documentary kind of about Tara Brown's lifestyle when he like actually became rich. Now there's a scene, and this is the UK and American version where yes, they call him Spencer Davis when they put up his name, but in more Europe where it's like different languages, they put the name Paul McCartney. They name him Paul McCartney. And yes, in that video, he looks a lot like Paul McCartney. And you've heard of Spencer Davis, right?
Yeah.
You know exactly what he looks like.
As you're talking, let me go and take another peek at him.
Look up Spencer Davis and Paul McCartney. Spencer Davis was actually greatly involved in that. Spencer Davis mainly was just like one of those doubles. He wasn't like involved after Paul's death. He was more involved before Paul's death.
Yeah, let me take a look here. Hold on one second.
Just look up like a young Spencer Davis.
Yep, I see a picture here of Paul with Spencer Davis. Yep.
And they have a great resemblance.
All right, so Spencer Davis, in your opinion, was one of the people that played the character of Paul McCartney, along with Tara Brown.
And Neil Aspinall played him, too.
And Neil Aspinall, that's another person that folks have surmised also played the part. Now, these people that played the part, as you said before, they did not have the permanent contract. So what were they doing, Nick? Were they just having cameo appearances? Were they just paging in and paging out every once in a while? How did that work?
How it worked was when Bill, as you know, Bill also played a character by the name of Vivian Stanshall. And Bill couldn't be Paul and Vivian Stanshall at the same time. And Billy also played different characters, too. He didn't just play Vivian Stanshall and Paul. He also played Billy Shepherd, too. Like, in 1968, Billy Shepherd's credited to producing one of the Beach Boys albums. And he was a writer for a few articles in the Beatles book. So he had to be himself, Paul, and Vivian Stanshall all at the same time. So what he did was he would hire other Paul lookalikes. When he's playing Vivian and he needs someone to fill in for Paul, he'll come up and he'll get someone else to play Paul. When he's Billy and he can't be Paul at the moment, he'll get, let's say, Spencer Davis or Neil Aspinall or Tara Brown to come in and fill in for him. Like, when he's not available to be Paul and he's being a different character, these other Pauls, depending on who he picks or what's going on and who's nearest, they're the ones that fill in while he's not there and he's being Vivian Stanshall or something else. And that's why those different people play Paul.
Okay. All right. So this is something that I have put forth in my shows, is that there were others, as is told in Memoirs. Memoirs openly says that there were others that played the character of Paul McCartney. And so I think your explanation makes a lot of sense. Now, what about the actual replacement itself, Nick? How did that take place? I know Memoirs tells us, gives us in great detail how it took place, but what is your perspective on that, having read Memoirs and many other books on the topic?
As I read Memoirs, Bill states that when Paul died, his uncle knew. Now, before I forget to bring this up, I'd like to bring this up. Have you heard about the other members of Bill's actual family?
No, I have not.
So I went and I did my research, and it took me about from the last time he spoke to now, it took me a while to figure this out. But have you ever heard Paul's thing that says son of the magician?
I have heard of that, yes.
Have you ever seen the photo comparison of Paul in 1967 and a young Aleister Crowley?
I have seen that, yes.
Now what happened was his Uncle Albert, which Albert's last name, Bill Shepherd, Shepherd's not his real last name. Albert pretty much adopted Shepherd as his own, and Albert gave him the name Shepherd. So Shepherd's not his real name. Bill Shepherd was adopted as probably a baby, I would guess. Albert Shepherd is a high-ranking Mason, and we all know that.
Okay, but hold on, Nick, hold on. So how did you come to the conclusion that he was adopted and all that? What are your sources for that?
When I looked up for Bill Shepherd's parents, I found something very shocking. Albert wasn't just an uncle that he knew. There's pictures of Bill, living in Albert's house, and I'll send those to you over email soon. I could get those pictures, but there's legal documentation about it, and it goes into the Bill Shepherd's records. Now, in his 1966 records, in 1906, it's completely wiped. He has no records up until that point. But as a young boy, his records are adopted at the age around 4 or 5.
Now, where did you go to obtain that information?
I went to a good friend of mine, Zach, who actually, what he does is he has a thing where he can get into these records, and I'll try getting Zach to speak with you about this because Zach gives me a lot of this information. But Zach gave me some.
So Zach is hacking? Is that what you're saying?
He's not hacking. Like, he gets this information from a certain person.
Okay, all right. So it sounds like he's able to
And
access.
and it also came from I'm Phony too. If you watch the Ron Apple when they're going through legal documentation,
Yeah.
like there's like a, have you ever seen his videos where like it cuts in really quick and cuts out like a flashcard?
Yep.
One of those flashcards are legal documentations of that.
Okay, all right. So it sounds like your friend Zach is able to access some genealogy types of databases. Is that what he's able to do? Okay, to go back. All right. All right. So let's just break it down a little bit so that the audience stays with us. So you're saying that his uncle is Uncle Albert, and this is the Uncle Albert that is referenced in his song.
Yes.
Right? And that it's Albert Shepherd, and Bill was adopted and given the adopted name of Shepherd. Okay, so we don't really know what his real name is. We know, based upon your research, his what's that?
There's a rumor of what his real name is. It's not confirmed by any sources yet, but due to I'm a Phony and due to all these things, and you've heard the son of magician, like the clue son of magician?
Yeah.
The son of magician is Paul. Paul is the son of the magician. And now who is the magician? Well, magic with a K is involved in Masonry, and big man by that was Aleister Crowley. And if you look at a young photo of Aleister Crowley and you look at a photo of Paul in 1967, it's uncanny. They look exactly like Paul, just has a mustache and a Beatles wig on.
It's interesting. They actually were going to use the younger Aleister Crowley on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, and they opted not to because they said that the resemblance was too close.
Yeah. It's not confirmed, but Bill is the illegitimate son of Aleister Crowley. So it's not confirmed, but it's possible. That's how I think Albert became a 33rd ranking Mason, and that's how the replacement went down. Since Aleister probably got Albert in that high ranking place, Albert was able to get certain ties with certain people. Now when Paul died, it was only a few hours later when they brought Bill up. And Bill, he was the man of 100 voices. He can change his voice to sound whoever he wanted to be like. So that helped Albert make him become Paul. And since Bill already resembled Paul in a way that would be able to fix it with plastic surgery, Albert was training Bill in anticipation of that day. And Albert knew that when Paul died, it would be the perfect opportunity to get his nephew in that spot. And it really did help Bill become Paul McCartney. And the high-ranking Masonry, George Martin was a Mason. They were all Masons. The Beatles didn't even know. That's why John sent his MBE back, because that's when he found out. But since they were Masons, they all knew what was going on. They all knew about the industry. And they knew that for the sake of the record companies and the sake of the social engineering, they would need to replace Paul. And since they had this guy Bill, after a few hours, they sent him off to Kenya with Mal Evans to get the plastic surgeries. And that's how the replacement went down, I believe.
Yeah, when I take people through the chronology, the timeline from when Paul allegedly died on September 11th, 1966, and how quickly Bill was there. I mean, he was there the next day on September 12th, right?
Mm-hmm.
And within 5 days, Brian Epstein and Bill were meeting with John Lennon to talk about this whole thing. So, yeah, the timing is unbelievable. It leads a lot of people to believe that perhaps the accident wasn't really an accident.
Yeah, that it was planned.
Yeah, and of course there's no way to prove that, but the timeline should at least make people stop and pause and just to kind of consider the fact that maybe it wasn't an accident. I don't know.
What I believe is they tried to kill Paul early on, but they failed. Have you heard about the moped accident?
Yes, I do know. In fact, there's a picture of him on the internet. Yeah.
If you've seen that picture, look in his eyes, you could see that he was completely and utterly terrified. Now, the story behind that moped accident, this is what I believe what happened, is I believe that moped accident wasn't an accident. I believe that that's when they were gonna try to kill him, but they failed. And that's why he looked so terrified in that photo. And the reason they took that photo was to try, because Paul was having these visions of his death. And he felt that if he took that photo and he could explain to the Beatles what happened in that moped accident, that they would believe him. But of course they didn't believe him. And that's why Ringo sings, sorry that I doubted you. I was so unfair. You died in a car crash and you were in a car crash and you lost your hair. Like, you died in that, and I'm sorry I didn't believe you. The reason they took that photo was to try to convince the Beatles that Paul thought that something was going to go down and that he was in danger. And that makes me feel really bad for him, because, like, imagine being a young 20-year-old, 25-year-old man and knowing you're going to die and knowing that there's nothing you can do about it and none of your friends and family believe you.
And that moped, that picture is, he's pretty beat up in that picture.
Yeah, and I believe that even after the moped, after he was already on the ground, they beat him. Because a moped accident, yes, it would do some damage in a chipped tooth. He said he only got if you've read in interviews, he said he only got a chipped tooth in that accident. Only. But if you look at the picture, he's got blood on his face. So I believe that after he chipped his tooth, they beat him and left him for dead.
All right. I hadn't heard that perspective yet, so very interesting. I don't know whether that is what happened, but I do agree with you that the picture of Paul after that moped accident, he looks pretty cut up and beat up. I remember thinking to myself when I saw that picture, that must have been one heck of a fall for him to look the way he did. And what I'll do, Nick, is I'll put that picture in the slideshow so the audience can see it too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots? This is something else I know that you wanted to talk about.
Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots was a band that started in early 60s, primarily after the Diplomats. It happened like maybe a year after the Diplomats like stopped really like doing a lot with Phil Ackrell.
Yeah.
Which Phil Ackrell was Billy Shepherd.
So you agree that Shepherd played the part of Phil Ackrell also?
Yeah. But Phil Ackrell wasn't a real person. Phil Ackrell was just a character. He wasn't even
right.
like a real man. And there's people think, oh, Phil Ackrell wasn't there because look at him, the photos of him and the videos of him in 1990. The videos of him in 1990 look a lot like Paul McCartney. Look a lot like him. Like, I mean a lot like Paul. Like a really lot. Like, it's hard to, if you told me it was Paul, I would believe you. And I believe that the reason Phil Ackrell was doing gigs then is just Bill wanting to just chill out. And as you could see, Phil Ackrell wasn't really working that hard on those shows. He was just really chilling, calm, and relaxed. And I think that was just Bill's time off from being this big thing and just wanting to just have one normal thing where he doesn't have 1,000 people screaming, and he just wanted to have something that he could enjoy for himself.
You're saying he did the gig to step away from the McCartney character and just basically do something that was not so high profile.
Yeah, something he could enjoy and not have to something, because if you see Paul, like later years of Paul, he doesn't like people recording him. He wants to have privacy, but he just can't get it. He can't go out. So, but since people don't care that much about Phil Ackrell can go out and not be recorded 24/7 and just have his own life. So I think Bill did that just so he could have some privacy and just not have to worry about it and just have an enjoyable time. But with the Pepper Pots, there's a few members of the Pepper Pots that pretty much put a shock on me because, you know Neil Innes?
Oh, you talking about Neil Innes from the Ruddles?
That's how you put it. I thought it was Neil Innes. Yeah, Neil Innes. Well, he was also in Vivian Stanshall's band.
Yes, he was.
He was part of that. If you look very closely, where they're like jumping up and down and they're like standing there with the guitars and it's just photo shoot for the band, there's a person there that looks a lot like Neil Innes. A lot like him. And I believe that when Bill made the Bonzo Dog Doodah band, he wanted to have some of his friends in the band, considering there was going to be like 6 guys in that band.
Yep.
So he brought 1 or 2 people from the Pepper Pots. Now, Pepper Pots, they did Beatles covers, and they did their own music.
Yep.
Now, people say, oh, how could Bill be Paul? Bill, no one can write like Paul. Bill had a very different writing style than Paul, and if you look at Bill's original songs that he wrote, they were very deep. They had a lot of meaning. You could look for meanings in all of his songs that he wrote. And that's the same way it happened to Paul after 1966. His songwriting style changed to be more like Bill's. And Bill was a man of a lot of voices. So in different songs, he kind of sounds... In one song, he sounds like a little like Vivian Stanshall. If you listen to Please Please Me, and I Saw Her Staying There, the covers by the Pepper Pots, and you play them at the same time as the Beatles versions,
yeah,
The instrumental is different because it's different people playing the instruments, but the vocals sound the exact same.
I have that album, in fact, and there was one track on there where he sounds a lot like the voice of Paul McCartney. Now, the thing is with the Pepper Pots, they were doing Mercy Beat songs, folks, just so you know. We're going back the very early years of the Beatles. So on that album, Bill Shepherd, he uses his name, his actual name, as for the credits for the songs that are not the Beatle covers, obviously. So for the songs that he wrote, his name is credited to those songs. And of course, we have, Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots, and then in 1967, we have Sergeant Pepper, right? So we have to kind of start to connect the dots, right?
Yeah, coincidence? I think not. Think of this. In Revolver and Yesterday and Today, where one it's a butcher shop, and the other one is Paul sitting in a coffin-like thing. And I think and that's before Paul died. And I think that was Paul, preparing for his departure. Those are clues of him knowing about his death before he died. Like, you knew something was going on, but I think Paul did that because he knew he was going to die. But then after Paul died, there's signs that Paul's going to die. There's a lot of signs. There's the cover clues, and then there's lines and songs. There's the song She Said, where it's like, she said, I know what it's like to be dead. They turned he into she.
Right. That's something that they did. They would turn he to she. That's one of the ways that they were able to camouflage the message. Now, Nick, the thing is, Yesterday and Today, you're referring to the Butcher album.
Yeah.
And that was released on June 20th of 1966. So that was actually before Revolver. The Butcher cover was one of those covers that, when you take a look at it, it's pretty grotesque. And so that it was then reissued with a different cover. That's the trunk cover, where Paul is sitting in the trunk, which is obviously a clue for people who are doing Paul is Dead research of Paul sitting in a coffin, if you will. I mean, it's pretty morbid when you think about it. And and then the other album was that actually was between Revolver and Sgt. Pepper, a collection of oldies.
Yes, and that's Bill's introduction.
That's what Bill is on the front cover. Shepherd's on the front cover of that album. Oldies was a greatest hits album, is what it was. And I explained on my shows that it was a very odd title for the album, calling it a collection of oldies, because in 1966, when it was released, the songs weren't old. I mean, the oldest song was only 3 years old. So it was very strange.
I believe that oldies, even though it's Bill's introduction and he doesn't sing on the album, but not only is it his introduction, it's Paul's tribute.
Yeah.
And there's a thing of 4 guys standing around, one of them looking like Paul, but Bill actually appears on that cover 2 times. One when they're standing all around the car. That's supposedly them standing around Paul's car, and Bill standing with them, kind of comforting them. And then there's the car going into Bill's head, and then there's Bill himself sitting on the album. And the way they called it the oldies was just weird.
Yeah, that was very strange.
Yeah.
All right, so we have the Pepper Pots, and Bill was one of the writers and performers of the Pepper Pots. And then, of course, like we mentioned, Nick, then we have Sgt. Pepper in 1967. So let's just recap a little bit. Shepherd, based upon your research, he was adopted. His uncle was Albert Shepherd, and you believe, based upon your research, that he is the illegitimate son, he being Bill, of Aleister Crowley. And his uncle, Albert, is the one that actually pushed him along to make sure that he had the skills that were necessary. So when the opportunity arose, he would be able to step in to the shoes of, well, in this case, the shoes of Paul McCartney. Right? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, we had a collection of oldies, which we just talked about. So it's starting to all come together here. And you've done a lot of research, Nick. I'm very impressed. Let's move now to, I know you want to talk about Freemasonry and Tavistock. So what do you want to tell us about that?
I want to say that. Now, this is the part that kind of gets me a little angry and upset, that we're not all making our own choices. We can't decide what we want to do. There's these Tavistock industries and these things that use masonry as a way to kind of socially engineer how kids all listen to rap music, how back then they all listened to Beatles and Rolling Stones. That's a good example of Masonry and Tavistock Institute. Now, Tavistock was a thing about it. It was primarily for social engineering.
Right.
They just used masonry to basically power it. Now, Paul McCartney says in a 1968 interview that they have power, but they want to use it for the good. And what he meant by that is, we want to socially engineer people so that it could benefit society. And since Paul wasn't going to be able to do that, they needed someone else to do it in his place, which is why they brought Bill. I like to bring this up because this is very important in that field and in that thing, that this is a very necessary thing that you need to know. That there are 33 degrees in masonry. 33 is the highest. There are 13 more ranks that go up. Now, those 13 ranks, those are the Illuminati.
That's right.
Those 13 ranks control everything that goes on throughout the world. Every political thing, they control everybody. Tavistock is being used by the Illuminati, and it's being used by the Masons.
That's right.
And Tavistock had a lot to do with how the replacement went down. Now, Billy Shepherd, I believe, was a 33rd degree Mason, but because he got knighted, that's a good example of the Tavistock using these people as their own pawns. And this year, Paul McCartney got another medal from the Queen.
Yes.
Service and music.
He keeps getting all kinds of accolades. Yes, that's right.
And that was actually like last month, April 5th, 2018. He got award for service. The reason that they're doing this, the reason that they're getting these awards is because of the replacement, because he is doing it. That's why he's getting the awards, and because of the masonry. And Tavistock, what they want is a utopian society. They want a society that would be best suited for the world. And they're using masonry, those hand signs, are using backwards masking. They're using new rappers and new things to do that. Because think about it, the new generation of kids from each time period, they're all into that stuff. And their minds are being programmed by these big idols and big things that, oh, since my favorite musician does this, I want to do that too. So they look up to their musicians and they do that, which kind of helps Tavistock socially engineer, because they want to test. The reason they're putting rappers in now, and they did rock then, they're doing because they want to test to see what will happen, what will the new generation do, how will it affect society, and that's why they're doing it.
Yes, and you've listened to, I'm assuming, Mark Devlin's shows.
Yes.
Where Mark talks a lot about social engineering and Tavistock and Freemasonry and so on. Now, Nick, I want to go back to one thing here. The award that McCartney recently received, which was back in May, was the Companion of Honor at Buckingham Palace, and that was for his contribution to music. So, as I mentioned, and you mentioned, Nick, he continues to receive these awards, and he's being rewarded by the elite apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that folks really have to try to understand, that, this is very, very high-ranking stuff. Now, also I want to go back to the Masonic pyramid, because this is very important too, and you touched on some very important information. So we have the 33rd degrees of Freemasonry, and as you've mentioned in the book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears, Bill tells us that there are 13 degrees above the 33rd degree. And there are also 20 degrees of rank above the Illuminati that few humans have ever heard of. So the structure, the pyramid structure within the Masonic pyramid, there are a lot of levels, there are a lot of degrees, and a lot of people make the mistake of thinking it's just the 33rd degree or the 32nd degree Masons, that they're the ones that are actually the foot soldiers. They're the ones carrying out the orders and the strategy and the planning of the degrees that are above them.
Exactly.
And also in the book, and I know you read the book, that Bill openly says that Lucifer rules the world, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the part that gets me angry. Because just think about, you want to have these ideas, you want to do this, you want to do that, but you're being controlled. Everything you do is not by your choice. It's by their choice. If they want you to do that, they'll let you, but if they don't, they won't. And Lucifer supposedly rules the world. That just gets me mad on so many levels, and that's why I like to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, no one's gonna
really remember, and no one's gonna know. And we have the right, as people, we have the right to know these things. And that's what Bill did. Bill thought that we had the right to know what was going on behind the scenes. And he wanted people to know that Lucifer ruled the world. He thought that people should know. And that's why I respect him, in a sense, because he knew that we should know it, so he told us.
Well, it was very interesting to me in the book that he laid out all the degrees in Freemasonry. I found it extremely informative because you can read many, many books that have been published about the secret societies and Freemasonry, and you would never have gotten that information. And in one fell swoop, in that one chapter, I think it was called Masonic Checkmate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and it's a picture of John Lennon's drawing.
Yeah, and Bill just lays it out. Now, let me ask you this before we leave this. You have a theory that his father is Aleister Crowley. So Bill would be the illegitimate child of Aleister Crowley, and then his uncle Albert picked up the reins and, as we mentioned before, pushed him along. But what about the fact that in the book, Shepard does not speak highly of Aleister Crowley? In fact, he says that Crowley, he had a doctrine of hate. So essentially, he's turning around if that is his...
And he hates Crowley.
Yeah, he doesn't like him, right?
And that's what I think. That's why I think. I think something happened that Albert had. Like, Albert didn't want to really adopt Shepard, but he had to because Crowley had to do something wrong. And that's maybe why Bill hates Crowley in a sense. Like, he doesn't like him because of what he did in his past. But Bill knows that if Crowley is his father, he knows, yeah, it's my father, and I have to respect him in a sense for being my father, but I don't like him at all. I hate him. I hate his guts, but I have to like give him the respect he deserves as that high-ranking Mason. And that's why he put him on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. That's why in his live shows when they're doing those slideshow things, Aleister Crowley's in one of the flashcards. That's why I can't remember where it's from, but I heard like a thing that Paul says, son of the magician. Like, he literally says son of the magician. And then there's like chaos and creation in the backyard. And that's where I heard it from. There's like a little thing where he talks about you can make sentences and then take letters and change them around. And he said like one thing and he turned the sentence and he took letters out and he changed the letters around and he made it for my soulmate, LLM.
Yeah. Like
Linda McCartney. And then he took one and he switched out the letters and he like took out certain words and he put son of the magician. And when I heard that, I was like, what? And as Paul McCartney said, Paul McCartney said this interview that Aleister Crowley did magic with a K, which is like the Masonic. That's what Masonry is. It's magic with a K, and it goes into Satanists and Satanism.
Well, actually, Crowley came up with that, right? He wanted to differentiate magic, his magic, versus, run-of-the-mill magic. So magic with a K was based in mysticism,
yes,
the esoteric, plugging into unseen forces, and so on. So that was why Crowley actually put the K. He wanted to differentiate what he was doing versus what others were doing.
Yeah, and when Paul says son of the magician, Aleister Crowley was the magician. Bill might be the son of the magician. I can't remember which song it is, but in one of Billy Pepper Pot songs, they don't say his name directly, but they kind of point a finger at Aleister Crowley.
Do they really?
Yeah, they don't say his name, but I'll send you the link to the song. But they don't say his name, but they kind of point a finger at him and say, "You're the one doing this," but they don't say his name. And I believe that Aleister was his father. And if you look, they were gonna put a younger picture of Aleister Crowley, but it resembled Bill too much. It resembled Paul. People would find out. And the reason they looked so much alike is because Bill was the son of Crowley. And look at Paul McCartney's father. Look at his real father. And take a picture of an older version of Aleister Crowley. They look a lot alike. They're bald. They have the face. Aleister Crowley has a rounder face, but they still look a lot alike.
I'm not understanding the connection you're making there with Jim McCartney, biological Paul's father. What's the connection there between him and Crowley?
And this seems very crazy, but crazy enough where it would make sense. My one friend believes that Aleister Crowley and Paul McCartney's father were related, and that Bill is somehow related to the real Paul, like their family.
Okay, well, that's interesting too. You've made a couple of interesting points here. Food for thought, something that I will have to think about. But let's talk a little bit more about Neil Aspinall and I Am a Phony. What do you know about Neil Aspinall?
Neil Aspinall is known for being the Beatles' road manager, primarily a friend of the Beatles. He was there for the recordings. He was one of the people that played Paul, and he played a big part in that. But in 2007, there was a man by the name Martin something. It's a very hard last name, but he made a name for himself, calling himself Billy Martin. So Billy Martin started working on a documentary called The Rotten Apple.
This would be the Rotten Apple series.
Yes, the Rotten Apple series. But at the time, I'm a Phony wasn't a corporation. That was just his YouTube channel name. It wasn't a corporation yet. Paul McCartney and Neil Aspinall had an idea. Now, Paul McCartney, back then, he was having a very troubled life. He was having issues with legal documentation in the Beatles catalog because of Michael Jackson making money off it.
Yeah.
And he was having a very hard time because he wanted to do remakes of those songs with his band, and he just couldn't. So he was having a really hard time, and he felt like, well, if I can't do that, then I don't want to be Paul McCartney anymore. If I can't do what I want to do because some guy won't let me use the music that I wrote after 1966, and he won't let me use the music that the Beatles wrote before that, then I don't want to be this guy anymore. If I can't play the songs that made him who he was.
Well, I think the issue is, Nick, let me just stop you there for a second because I've done some research into this. I've had some people contact me about that. I think the issue with the songs prior to 1967 that were recorded by biological Paul McCartney is that Bill does not collect royalties on those songs because he did not write them. So the only way he can make money on those songs when he plays them is he has to get a piece of the publisher's action, not the songwriter's action, because he's not the songwriter. So I think that prior to 67 and biological Paul's songs, what he was wringing his hands over was the fact that he wasn't getting paid for those songs. So he would go do shows, he'd play live, he'd play Yesterday and some of the other early Beatles stuff like Drive My Car and so on. He wasn't getting paid for that from a royalty perspective. And I think then what happened post 1967 or post Sgt. Pepper, I think what he was looking to do was he wanted more money, more of the publisher's share for the songs that he wrote. So I think that he probably looked at the contract and saw that his cut of the action from a royalties perspective, I think he felt that it could have been a whole lot better. And I think his battles with Michael Jackson and later on with Sony, and he finally resolved it with Sony, I think it had more to do with getting a larger piece of the publisher's pie. That's what I think it is. Anyway, I'll just leave you with that because that's going to be in my next video, which I need to work on and get out by the end of this month. That'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And it became, as we all know, it became such an issue for Bill. It became a very big issue because he wanted the money for those songs. And he felt that if he's going to be this guy, he wants the money that the guy made. If he's going to be him, he should get the money. And that became into why he didn't want to be. In 2006 and 2007, at that point, I don't think he wanted to be Paul anymore. I really don't think he wanted to. So he was going to tell the truth. He was going to reveal that he's been Bill all this time, that it's not really Paul and Paul that. He was going to reveal it. But his only question was, how am I going to do that? How am I going to get that done? Since Billy Martin was doing these I'm a Phony videos, because Billy Martin was telling us clues that we didn't even know about yet. He was the one that was telling everybody about the Masonry before even Bill told them.
So you think that Billy Martin, who had the I Am a Phony channel, you think that in the beginning he wasn't associated or linked into McCartney? Okay.
He actually has a documentary, and it's on Facebook. It's a video of him when he was younger, like in his 30s, and he talks about how he's been doing Paul McCartney's dead research since he was my age, and no one ever believed him. So he wants to make this documentary for the people that do believe him. And what caught Neil Aspinall. Neil Aspinall is the guy that found I'm a Phony. What caught Neil Aspinall's mind was that Billy Martin was making videos of Masonic clues that people didn't know about yet before they were even going to talk about the Masonry. And Neil Aspinall was like, wait, maybe this guy's on to us. And then after he found out that Billy Martin was onto them, they made a thing saying, if you find the hidden message in the Code album, well, not Code, Love album, you'll win a prize. Knowing that Billy Martin they knew he was going to find it first. So they want to make it for him so they can get into contact. And of course, Billy Martin put a thing saying, I found the code. Billy found the code within the first month of the album being released. He found the code. He got in touch with Neil Aspinall, and Neil Aspinall started an organization with Billy Martin. Now they were going to name it after his YouTube channel, I'm a Phony. And this was going to be really good for them, since Paul was planning on doing it anyway. This would be good for them. So they started making this organization, and in one of the I'm a Phony videos, they show legal documentation. He shows pictures of Neil Aspinall's signature on the legal papers for the contracts of I'm a Phony, that they were going to reveal it in 2012. And Paul McCartney knew about it, and Paul McCartney signed the papers saying, okay, in 2012 we're doing this. So they all signed the papers, and they started doing the documentary, Wing Beetle and thing. And the thing that was going to reveal it was called the Revelation album, and it was going to be a movie too, and that was going to be what revealed everything. That was going to be their big reveal. And everybody was keeping tabs. There was a briefcases where Mal Evans, I'd like to bring him up on this, Mal Evans was writing a book about the thing, the replacement and everything, and he was going to release it to try to reveal to people because he felt bad for the real Paul. So they killed him.
Tell us a little bit about Mal Evans' his death, because it's a very peculiar story, and I think a lot of people don't know about it. In fact, I have a recording of Mal on a radio show back in the early 1970s where he said that he co-wrote the title track to the Sgt. Pepper album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and also Fixing a Hole.
Yes.
And that's very interesting, right? So he claims that he co-wrote those two songs with Bill. So what happened with Mal Evans then, Nick? What happened to him?
So Mal Evans was another roadie. He was also the Beatles' bodyguard, and when as you said, he wrote a few lines, and Paul admitted it. But the reason he wrote those lines is because the songs were almost finished, and there was just Bill would sometimes get blockage. Like he just couldn't figure out. He just couldn't think of stuff sometimes because he didn't know what he wanted to do, since he wasn't going to do love songs anymore from that year. So Mal Evans kind of just gave him a few ideas. He didn't write the songs. He did write a few lines though to Fixing Hole. So he gave him ideas.
Okay.
And since he didn't officially write the songs, he didn't get credit for it, but he did get paid. Now in the 70s, the Beatles had just broken up and it was getting really heated. Bill and John were fighting. Everybody was fighting, and Mal was getting very angered by all of it. And now Mal was a very gentle-hearted man. He was a very nice man. He wouldn't do anything violent. That's just the kind of person he was. And he was writing a book about everything that happened. And he was going to tell the story of Bill. But they found out what was going on, and Bill tried stopping it. Bill didn't want Mal to die.
Yeah, he had a manuscript. Mal had a manuscript, and it was going to be a tell-all book.
And Bill tried, before they killed Mal, Bill tried to stop it. As Bill says in an interview, as Paul, he says, if they had gotten me there, I could have stopped all of this. Bill felt very bad for Mal, for what happened to him. And they went and they shot him.
It was a policeman that shot him.
Policeman. And they placed a gun to make it seem like he was violent. But everybody knew that that's not what happened. Everybody knew that Mal wouldn't do that.
Yeah, they said he had become very violent and uncontrolled, and then of course you're absolutely right. I remember the same stories coming back, from the Beatles and the Inner Circle saying that Mal Evans was never like that. So that storyline didn't make any sense. So it was very peculiar.
Mal Evans died. I don't know if most people know this, but Paul was getting very angry by it, and he was going out. making songs about it, and he was pretty pissed off, and he felt responsible. He felt, if I had never did this, this wouldn't have happened. So he felt responsible, and he had that guilt, so he made those certain songs about it.
What songs, anything come to mind? Because I'm drawing a blank that have to do with Mal Evans.
One song is, it's both about Mal Evans and John, and it's called Here Today. He says it's only about John, but it's about both of them.
I know the song off of Pipes of Peace, I think it is, right? The album.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And Pipes of Peace was also about that. Pipes of Peace because Paul was angry that two of his closest friends were shot to death. So Pipes of Peace was also about peace. Stop shooting people. Stop being violent. Just be nice to each other. Like, stop being violent.
Yeah.
Like, no more war. No more gun violence. Just stop with the nonsense. Because Bill isn't a bad person. He's a good man. That's why he went and did I'm a Phony.
I think he's in very deep, and I think this is my own perspective. It's conjecture, but I'll give you my thoughts on this thing. In the beginning, of course, it was very enticing, right? You're going to replace the most popular musician at the time, at the peak of their popularity. The money was going to be good. You're going to be able to hobnob with people that you probably never dreamt that you were going to hobnob with. And as time went on, things, got really good, as far as his career with the Beatles. He struggled a bit when the Beatles broke up, and then he was on his own. But then, Wings picked up, and things started to look a lot better again. And then his solo career after Wings was very healthy, especially in the 1980s. But I think what happened, Nick, is that as time has gone on now, as you read Memoirs, he's 81 years old this year. And so he is running out of runway with regard to people knowing who he is, because it wasn't Paul McCartney that wrote all these songs since 1967. It was Bill Shepherd. But nobody knows who Bill Shepherd is.
With I'm a Phony, so Neil Aspinall had a phone call with Mal, and Mal knew what was going to happen. He was afraid for his life. And Mal told Neil, if anything so happens to me, if they kill me, if they do something bad to me, I want you to have this book come out. I need it to come out. And there's little screenshots of it. Neil Aspinall has the book. He gave it to I'm a Phony. And I'm a Phony showed some pages of the book in his videos. He would show pages of it. And that was just paying homage to Mal. And they felt bad for Mal, so they wanted to make a tribute. And them showing those pages of the book, that was their tribute in the videos. So Paul wasn't very public in the early 2000s. He wasn't that big. He wasn't doing much because he was preparing not to be Paul anymore. And sadly, Neil Aspinall got cancer and passed away. And that was a very sad day. And that's when Bill went, I can't do this without Neil. If Neil isn't here, then I don't want to do it. I want to keep being me because of Neil. So he wanted to keep being Paul because of Neil's death, which pushed back the Revelation movie and album is scheduled now to come out in 2020 something, late 2020s.
Okay, well, this is very interesting because
and when he's 90, probably around then, because the nines.
Yep. And this is exactly how I have explained this, is that we will probably get as close to full disclosure on September 9th of 2027, when he's 90 years old, and September 9th, 2027 is triple nines again, because 2027, if you take the last two digits, 2 and 7, you add them together, you have 9. So it's 999. Just like we have 999 this September, and Memoirs was released on September 9th, 2009. So he's
Have
definitely...
you ever heard of Bill Shepherd's birthday?
I believe his birthday is September 9th, 1937.
Yep, that's his birthday.
Yeah. I actually sent an email off to Tom Harriet and asked Tom if I was right. So how did you calculate it? How did you figure it out? Because I figured it out based upon all the nines.
I figured it out not because of the nines and things like that. I figured it out because the song Birthday,
yeah,
that song was supposedly, now I'm not knowing this, that song, you know how some anniversary things will have the timelines of when they were recorded.
Yeah.
Birthday was finished, not recorded, but like ready to be put out on September 9th.
Okay.
And Birthday had a backwards masking. He's dead, you sing hallelujah. That if you play it backwards, that's what you would make out. And Birthday was very close to becoming, and White Album came out late 1968.
Yes.
September 9th, 1968 is when and that's late. That's very late. It's almost the end of the year. So Birthday, that's what rung a bell to me. That's when I thought his birthday was. And also the book release date was September 9th, 2009, if I'm correct.
Okay, so I'm just taking a look here. So you're saying the song was completed September 9th or released on September 9th?
It wasn't released on September 9th. Hold on, when's the release date for the White Album?
It was released on November 22nd, 1968, which would make sense because November is 11 and 22, it's 33, so it's the 33 degrees of Freemasonry. So the White Album was released on November 22nd, 1968.
I heard the September 9th thing from, it's called R3RA. It's like the word R, A-R-E, 3R, and then the letters R-A. And that's like a big, it's not an official I'm a Phony. It's an unfinished version of the Revelation movie. And there's a clue to that. They kind of point that out.
It says here that Birthday was written on September 18th, 1968, not the 9th, September 18th. But 1 and 8 is 9. You see? Okay.
Yeah.
So Bill is still playing with the 9s here. So this is very, very interesting. All right. So September 18th, but the 1 and the 8, when you add it together, folks, is 9. Now, let me just back up a second. And Nick, you chime in here too. In the book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears, Bill says that he's all about the 6s and biological Paul is all about the 9s. And so what I believe he has done is, since he is playing the part of Paul McCartney,
he has to use the 9s.
He's using the 9s. So he's actually using the numerology around biological Paul McCartney. So,
and if you notice when they do that little 666 thing with their hand, when Bill does it, he does it like the normal way, 666. He does the actual 666.
Yeah.
But before 1960, like in the 1964 interview, Paul does it with his right hand, which would make it 666, but it's flipped around since he's doing it with the other hand, which would make it 999.
Yeah, it's very, the numbers are very, very important. In the book, Bill, he really states that the numbers are important. He uses some language there to lead people to believe that what he's actually saying is the numbers are not important. But what he's really saying is that the numbers are important, but if you think they're not, then there's no need to pay attention to them. Let's just move on. It's a way of speaking that the Masons use. It's called masterfully speaking. And that is throughout all of Memoirs. And I am going to be doing a video, Nick, like I said, at the end of this month, early July, the very latest, which will explain a lot of this. Now, let me just recap a little bit here so we get the audience back on track. So I Am a Phony, you believe I Am a Phony started out having nothing to do with Paul McCartney.
Yes. But after he found out the code in the Love album, that's when they brought him in.
Right. But before that, they were paying attention to him because he was revealing a lot of information in his videos, and his videos caught their attention.
And there's proof to this because Bill, there's an interview by the name of Mikey NL. It's his YouTube channel, and he was following up, and Billy Martin says in this interview that they were keeping tabs on him and that they brought him in, and like he admits it, like in this, and it's a video of him saying it, like in that interview, he admits that that's what actually happened.
Now, was he behind the Winged Beetle also?
Yes, he created all of those videos. They were all him.
You can't find it on YouTube anymore, the Winged Beetle.
The Winged Beetle, yeah, you have to find it. It's people re-upload it, or you could download it.
Yeah, you can't upload it. I tried uploading it because I have a copy of it.
Yeah.
And you can't upload it because YouTube will catch it right away for copyright.
And guess who copyrights it? Apple. Even though it's not an Apple project, if I Am a Phony uploads it, they won't copyright it. But if someone else uploads it, they copyright it.
Yeah.
Why not copyright him too? Why copyright everybody else except him? Oh, because he's part of it. And he admits it in the interview. He says that he
has permission to upload the video.
And he admits that it's not just a YouTube channel anymore. It's an organization from Apple, and that Paul is behind it. And Paul recorded I'm a Phony. There's a channel called I'm a Phony Music, which is their music. Now mostly it's Billy Martin singing, but there's a few songs that Paul's singing. There's Shoes that Paul sings. There's a few songs that Paul sings, but they put it under I'm a Phony. They name it I'm a Phony, but it's Paul's song.
Very interesting. Let's move to the next topic here, close calls. So what close calls were there?
There was, in 1967, there was a party for Jane Asher and Paul McCartney's wedding. Well, it wasn't their wedding. It was like their engagement party.
Yeah.
And Russ Gibb, this is when he first found out, but he didn't believe it then, but now he does. He noticed Paul's a little thinner, has a mustache, doesn't notice anything. But Paul's over with this other girl, and Jane Asher's by herself. And Russ Gibb goes, why isn't Paul with Jane Asher? Oh, no, he's with his girlfriend, Linda Eastwood. Why isn't he with Jane? Oh, different Paul. It's not the same Paul. That's not the real Paul. That's his replacement. But they didn't tell him Paul was dead. They just told him that wasn't the same Paul. So he didn't know Paul was dead. He knew that it wasn't the same Paul, and that Linda was his girlfriend at the time.
Okay, so they thought they were seeing one of the lookalikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they didn't know Paul was dead.
Now, Nick, before we go any further, I do want to note that there were, in my view, lookalikes used even when biological Paul was in the picture.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so just so people know, some people believe that it was just the Beatles and that was it.
And Billy Shepherd was in the picture before McCartney died. In 1963, Paul McCartney had a stomach virus and was pretty much bedridden and sick, and they couldn't play, so they got Billy Shepherd to take his place while he was sick, and that lasted for maybe 2 weeks. But luckily, one of the things is, there's a video of the live performance of Billy playing from 1963. So Bill was in the picture, he just wasn't like really, it wasn't Masonic, it wasn't Tavistock, it wasn't replacement because he's dead. It was just a fill-in.
You just filled in. So you have that video?
I could link it to you. I could link it to you in email.
Yeah, send it to me. I don't think I've seen that one. So you have another new one on me.
It's just a thing of early Beatles, but
well, that's very important to see Shepherd up on stage. He's with the other Beatles.
Yeah, and he's not. You could tell it's a latex face too. Like it's not plastic surgery. This is pre-plastic surgery. So he like kind of had fake ears and the fake cheeks on.
Yeah. He liked the fake stuff. He's an actor and he likes to wear the latex and all that stuff. So that's perfectly within character for Bill. So what are the close calls?
There was a time there was 2 times in the 80s, and there's more recent ones where people such as Bettina Crispin and Bettina Hubers at the time. I think it is. Believe that Paul's her father. Paul had the child early 60s in Hamburg, paid child support because he knew it was his daughter, the real Paul. And when Paul died, Bill decided, you know what? I'm not going to just do that to a kid. It's just a kid. They can't really do anything for themselves, so I'm going to finish paying that child support. So he decided that just to be nice, he's going to finish paying the child support. But when he stopped, the mother said, no, wait, you're rich and famous. We want a bit of that too. So they did the thing, and when the DNA didn't match, they sued him for fraud.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it was because he was a good guy that he wanted to pay the child support.
Yeah, because I think he had a choice. I think he could have been like, no, I don't want to do that. Don't do it.
Yeah, but if he didn't do it, he would have wound up with a legal issue for not paying child support. So since biological Paul was already writing checks, really Bill had no choice but to continue to write the checks, because if he stopped writing the checks, he would have to have a reason as to why he stopped. And he couldn't say, well, that's because I'm not the biological father. I'm a replacement. So in order to keep the masquerade going,
he kept doing it.
He kept writing checks. Yeah. And as soon as he didn't have to write them anymore, like when Bettina reached 18, he just stopped. It's like, okay, that's over with. I don't have to write you any more checks. That's what I think happened.
Yeah, that was a close call with the DNA test. And then there was more DNA tests. Paul McCartney supposedly had a son, but right before he died too, born in 1966.
Okay.
Or 7. But he had a biological son. And he had two sons, actually. One was named Philip. Philip looked a lot like Paul, but when the DNA didn't match,
That was that.
oh, well. Then there was the Japan incident in 1982 or 80. I can't, 81 or...
He was in the 80s, right, where he got busted
he got
having
busted for
weed.
marijuana.
Yeah.
And they took his fingerprints.
Yeah.
They didn't match, so they put Paul under a thing and they questioned him. And then they had him admitted to the Japan government, and then the British government got Paul out of that.
Well, and they had the fingerprints of biological Paul because of a fire that he had set when he was younger, right?
Yes. That's a funny story, that it was him and Pete Best. They were mad because they wouldn't let them play any more gigs, or they wouldn't pay him enough. So they took a condom and lit it on fire in the apartment.
Right, that's right. And then he had gotten arrested. They took his fingerprints, and that's how they have biological Paul's fingerprints. And they didn't match. They didn't match when Bill wound up being incarcerated in Japan. And so, as you mentioned, the British government had to step in order to get him out of that mess.
Mm-hmm. And then there was the I'm a Phony was a big close call, because those people, I'm a Phony wasn't supposed to do this, but what he did was he took a picture of Bill Shepherd that people have never seen before, and I sent you where he's like in the police cap hat.
Yep.
Now Bill Shepherd was part of the police thing, like he was a volunteer, I believe. He wasn't like a full-blown policeman, but like he was kind of like one of those volunteers, so there was a picture of him wearing a hat, or very early 60s, before Pepper Potts and before Diplomats, and it's a picture of him, and he has his short blonde hair, and I'm a Phony had the photo, and he wasn't supposed to use it, but what he did was he put the photo in his video, and he did it for like 4 seconds so that no one would notice. But he did for 4 seconds so that no one really noticed, but a lot of people noticed. He put a picture of Bill Shepherd before he became Paul. He put in the photo, and then he faded it into Paul after plastic surgery, and then he faded it back into Bill Shepherd so that people would see, oh yeah, that's him before he became Paul. Billy Martin, I'm a Phony, wasn't supposed to do that. He wasn't supposed to put that picture until the revelation. And he got in some trouble for that, and Paul got fingers pointed at him for that. And then someone said that, I guess, Paul accidentally, in 1967, so this is when he first became Paul, he grabbed the guitar right-handed, and then he realized his mistake, and he flipped the guitar left-handed as quickly as he could.
You're talking about the Penny Lane video? Was it Penny Lane?
Yes.
Yeah.
And John, out of anger, when he flips that table, that's not just to be funny. He did that out of anger at Bill.
Well, now, going back to being a part-time constable or policeman, there's a lyric in She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, right? And so I quit the police department and got myself a steady job.
Yeah.
Right? So I know for some folks, they might be thinking, well, these guys are reaching and everything else. But look, folks, when you take all of these clues by themselves, they appear to be completely meaningless. But when you start putting it all together, all the little clues, and you start kind of sweeping them up, you start to get a big picture of what's going on here. There was also the sound recordings, right? There was the sound analysis, the sonograms that were done.
By the name of Dr. Henry Truvey. He did a study saying that the voice print from Paul from Blackbird isn't the same voice print from Paul from yesterday. And that was a big issue, because now people are like, wait, that's not the same guy singing? Bill knew how to play a lot of instruments, but he didn't know how to play left-handed. And they were like they said, either you play this left-handed or you don't play at all. So he couldn't play the bass left-handed in that. And like the first few songs of Sgt. Pepper that they recorded, he couldn't play the bass. So George Harrison was credited to playing the bass on certain songs. And in the Revolution video, there's no bass. That's live. That's them playing live, but there's no bass audio.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, no bass audio.
And Bill, his primary instruments are wind instruments and piano.
Mm-hmm.
And also he could play guitar because he was in bands playing guitar. But he's a very, very accomplished musician.
And he's a good drummer, too.
I would say he's a decent drummer, good drummer, yeah.
And he redid tracks because out of anger at the Beatles for like when they made a mistake or something, he would go and redo tracks, which made a void.
Well, he did that on Sergeant Pepper. He mentioned that in Memoirs that he would actually, that's why he said he worked very long days to put Sergeant Pepper together, and he would go back and re-record the tracks that maybe George had put down or John had put down because he didn't like the way the guitar was being played, or it wasn't to his liking. In other words, maybe the guitar was being played well, but it wasn't the riff or the melody that Bill was looking for. So, he re-recorded the tracks, which of course, as a musician, that would tick you off a little bit to come in the next day and find out that, hey, that's not the guitar track that I recorded. Who did that? I did. So I would assume that there was a lot of, in the beginning, there had to be a lot of resentment, right? Hostility toward him for doing stuff like that. I mean,
they had to redo a track for Let It Be. Now, I'm a Phony released this track too. Which he wasn't supposed to, where just to be a joker and just to fool around, Bill, when he was recording Let It Be, when he says there will be a chance that they will see, he goes, there will be a chance, Bill, that they will, like he says his name as he's saying, and he wasn't supposed, he just did it to be funny and make everybody laugh. So they had to redo that track, and they didn't release it.
But Billy Martin released it?
Yeah, Billy Martin released it.
So he uses his own name as part of the lyrics in Let It Be.
But he didn't want to do it for the actual song. He just wanted to do it to, make everybody,
So it was an outtake, and then Billy Martin took the outtake, and he inserted it into one of his videos.
Yes. And then, if you know the anthology album, Paul McCartney burned all of the copies, and they had to remake them.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall that one. So refresh my memory on that.
So before Anthology got released, this was when people were closest to finding out the truth. Anthology was when they were going to originally tell the truth, but Paul's like, well, Bill was like, no, I want to do it. The reason he burned all the copies, he didn't just throw them out. No, he burned them. And you want to know why?
Why?
Because there was a song on there. It was called Apple Star. And it was going to be, and it was called, and Billy, I'm a Phony, released that track too. He literally, it was an actual Beatles song, and he released it under the I'm a Phony music channel. And it goes, Apple Star, it wasn't fake mustache. And it says Aleister Crowley. And if you play Apple Star back, it sounds a little bit like a distorted version of Sgt. Pepper. So if you play Sgt. Pepper backwards, you hear the name Aleister Crowley. You hear it was a fake mustache, and Apple Star was a forwards version of that backwards. They just recorded a song saying Apple Star was a fake mustache. Well, Bill didn't want to do that, so he decided to burn all the copies.
Okay, so they had that song on Anthology is what you're saying.
Yes. And that's an actual song. That's Paul. It's Paul and George singing the song.
Now, do you have a copy of that?
Oh, yeah, I don't need it. It's actually on the I'm a Phony channel. If you look up I'm a Phony Apple Star, you could find that song. It's a good song, not even gonna lie. It actually sounds pretty nice, but the lyrics is a big nod at, it was a fake mustache.
All right, I'm gonna have to go take a listen to that. Any other close calls?
Billy, when people were trying to find Billy Shepherd, when Billy Shepherd's name was first brought up, people were looking. They found many, many pictures of Bill before he became Paul. There was actually 2 photos of Bill before he became Paul in the White album collage. There was 2. And Billy Shepherd used his own name when he published it was, I can't remember what it was from, but it was an article in the Beatles book after, it was in 1968, I believe.
Yes.
And he used his own name as the publisher.
Yeah, in fact, I think I have a copy of that.
Yeah. And people were like, wait, this guy is real. The replacement is real. And that's most of the close calls I could think of.
Yeah. So there are plenty of clues out there, and like you said, Nick, the close calls. I've called them out on some of my shows, and again, folks, I don't have anything to do with the book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears, nor does Nick. But if you're into the Paul is Dead research, it's a must-read book. You have to read it. And I know there are folks out there that think it's all fiction and so on, but you have to read it. And I have found that everybody running around saying it's all fiction and it's not true are people that have not read the book. But in any case, so I'll end my commercial there for the Memoirs of Billy Shears. Now, let's talk a little bit about Vivian Stanshall, Nick. Now, there's a lot of people that do not see a resemblance between Stanshall and the guy playing McCartney.
Stanshall resembles more
He resembles more of a 1967 era of Paul McCartney. He doesn't resemble most of the era. He resembles the 1967 and the 90s era of Paul. Because in the 90s, when Vivian Stanshall, right before he died, he looked a lot like Paul in the 90s with just a beard. Now, Vivian Stanshall, Bill was known for being a good wind player, and he couldn't do that with the Beatles, and he wanted to, like, have his own thing, so he created the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band with Neil Innes, like I said before,
Right.
with his old bandmate, and they did that, and it was a big thing, and there's differences in Billy Shepherd's appearances. Vivian Stanshall, you could say, oh, he couldn't have been Billy Shepherd because there's younger pictures of Vivian Stanshall. Look at the teenage pictures of Billy Shepherd and look at the teenage pictures of Vivian Stanshall, and then look me right in the eye and tell me that's not the same person. Those pictures of Vivian Stanshall as a teenager, those aren't Vivian Stanshall. That's pictures of Billy Shepherd before he played any other character. That was Bill Shepherd as a kid.
And the thing is, what most folks don't realize is that Vivian Stanshall himself went through a huge transformation.
He looks so different.
So different. It's the same guy, but he went through a transformation. And what I mean by transformation, folks, is that we had what Bill Shepherd used to look like playing Vivian Stanshall. He's Scottish. And then after all of the surgeries, the fillers, and the latex, he looked very, very different as part of the Doodah Band with Neil Innes. And people just seem, Nick, to kind of just breeze right through that. They never talk about the fact that Stanshall himself changed tremendously.
And people could say, oh, Vivian Stanshall, look at his teeth. The teeth are different. Now, there's a thing with that. Vivian Stanshall actually wore fake teeth. There's a little thing at the end of one of their shows from the Do Not Adjust Your Set show.
Yeah.
Where he literally takes out the fake teeth. He literally, they're like those toy fake teeth. That's what he wore for all those teeth pictures. Like, he took them out. And then he looked a little more like Paul, like he had the Paul teeth. And, in 1967, in the Magical Mystery Tour movie, Vivian Stanshall's playing, but when John and George are cheering, they don't say, yeah, Bonzo. No, they say Paul. They call him Paul.
Isn't it kind of weird that he was in the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour movie anyway? I mean, doesn't anybody think that that's kind of weird? You have this guy in this, really the Doodah Band it had some popularity.
Not a lot, though.
Not a lot. And all of a sudden, this guy winds up in a Beatles film. Just that in itself should make you kind of scratch your head a little bit. How did he wind up there?
If you look up Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, there's no, Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. They said, oh, they formed in the early 60s. They didn't make a record or a single or an album till 1966. They didn't make their first live appearance till late 1966, early 1967, and there's no record of the band before that.
Well, also, who produced Urban Spaceman, which was their...
Paul McCartney,
which was their one quote-unquote big hit, and Paul McCartney, who basically is Vivian Stanshall, who was in the band, who was Bill Shepherd playing both guys. So the ties are there, you know? The connections are there. The linkages are there between Stanshall and McCartney. People just have to, they have to open their eyes and basically just clear out their head and take a look.
Have you ever seen the picture of Vivian Stanshall's right-handed Les Paul?
No. I can't say I focused on it. Go ahead.
If you look up Death Cab for Cutie, there's a little thing where Vivian Stanshall's holding a guitar and he has his one hand pointing in the air, and it's his guitar. He has like a brown guitar, and he plays it on some of the records.
Oh, I remember that picture. Okay.
Yes, and it's a right-handed brown guitar. Now let me repeat that: right-handed brown guitar. Now Paul McCartney, when he was recording the Flaming Pie album, he recorded a few videos of him recording, and he put them out as kind of like a commercial for Fireman to kind of like show people, oh yeah, he's gonna be having this upcoming album. And there's a lot of different cases where he does this, but Paul McCartney uses the same right-handed guitar that Vivian Stanshall uses it, but he plays it left-handed, and you can tell it's left-handed because the whammy bar and the knobs for it, they're on the opposite side of the guitar. So he's playing a right-hand guitar, but he just switched the strings around, and it's the same guitar that Vivian Stanshall played. Why does he have that guitar? Oh, maybe because he is Vivian Stanshall. Paul McCartney's son, James McCartney, looks a lot more like Vivian Stanshall than he does Paul McCartney.
He looks almost exactly like his father. I mean, when he
Yes.
was younger. I mean, he has the same coloring and everything. And people point to like, well, his nose is different. Well, he has his mother's nose. He has Linda's nose. So
Yeah.
I've actually shown a picture of Shepard when he was Stanshall before all the surgeries, and then a picture of Linda. And then when you take a look at both Stanshall and Linda, or Bill as Stanshall and Linda, you can see that James has, he looks like both his mother and his father. Does not look like a McCartney, a real McCartney, not at all. Doesn't look like
Yeah.
biological Paul.
His son actually had a bit of plastic surgery done on his chin and nose just to make him look a little more like Paul.
It's really kind of strange. People have asked me, do you believe that his children know that he's not Paul McCartney? I said, of course they know he's not Paul McCartney.
They call him, like, there's a video of when Paul walks in this house and they all call him Bill.
Is that right?
Yeah, and then there's a video of the recording studio where they call him Bill. And then there's a video where Paul's in a restaurant in the 70s and some lady comes up and says, "Hello, Billy."
Yeah, he was in a bar.
So, like, all of his friends and family, they don't know him as Paul, they know him as Bill.
Yeah, there's also a scene in Martin Scorsese's film, his documentary on George Harrison, Living in the Material World. And it's very long, folks. It's about 3+
Oh, yeah, when they
hours.
call him Bill and he goes, "Hey, why are you recording? Stop recording."
Well, there was a scene where when George was on a couch and then Bill came in and George looked up and said, "Oh,
Hello, William. Yeah.
Yeah, hello, William." And then he gives George a hug and he says, "Hello, George. It's good to see you again."
And it gets creepy because once he realizes what is going on, like once Bill realizes that they just recorded that, he goes, "Hey, stop recording. Don't record that."
Yeah.
Like he literally turns around and gets mad at the camera guy
Yeah.
for that. Like, and that kind of mind boggles me.
Let's move from Stanshall. Nick, I want to make sure we cover all your topics here. Do you want to talk about the British government, or do you think we spoke about that to some
I think we
degree?
spoke about that enough.
Okay, what about the Kenya films? Because there is a film out there that's showing him with the camera. He has like a video camera, and he's in Kenya. So what's up with that?
So you would think, oh, that's just them on vacation.
Yeah.
It's not. It's really not. There's way more that goes in. The reason they went to Kenya is to, one, throw off the suspicion. Because, John was recording the movie. Ringo was with John. Ringo was in Paris with John while they were recording the movie. George was in India. Well, what was Paul doing? And there's a thing where Neil Aspinall goes, "Oh, I don't know what Paul was doing at the time." So people thought, oh, maybe that's when Paul died. Maybe the reason they were all doing things is because Paul died. And, what if the Beatles were breaking up in 1966? There was a rumor that they were going to break up in 1966.
Yeah.
So the reason they went to Kenya, there was two reasons, actually. One was to throw off the suspicion of all of the rumors coming up. And two is that's where the plastic surgery took place.
Yeah, he was out there. Was it with Mal Evans?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the plastic surgery, I'm a Phony actually records he has a video. And I'm a Phony releases. Here's my main issue with I'm a Phony. They only want him to release a certain amount of information, because if they release too much, then it's going to be revealed if they release too much. But I'm a Phony doesn't care. He releases as much as he wants. And he released a video that has a little snippet of them taking a man who doesn't look like Paul at all, but who looks like Billy Shepherd on a bed, rolling him into like a hospital-like thing in Kenya.
Yeah, and how do you think he got that footage?
His connections with Paul, his connections with Neil Aspinall.
Okay. All right. So in
And
other
his
words,
connections with
he
Apple.
was getting this, he had this information, and he had this footage, but he wasn't supposed to release some of it, but he
Yeah.
did it anyway.
The only reason they gave him the footage was so that he could work on the videos, but not release it. They just wanted him to work on the videos to pretty much prepare it.
All right. Well, I have some information. I'll share it on this show. It's also going to be in my next video, Nick. That Bill is he's looking to release a new album this September 9th, 2018. So a new album will come out. Okay. And the information also has it that he's going to announce a tour either on that day or soon afterwards, after the release of the album. So my source has said to me that they didn't know what stage the album was as far as completion, but they were shooting for September 9th. Maybe I should just phrase it that way. They're shooting for September 9th to release it. And as we saw with Birthday, if it doesn't make September 9th, they'll make sure that the date has something to do with the nines, right?
Yeah.
That's what they'll do. So anyway, very, very interesting discussion, Nick. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
I'd like to talk about Bill and the Pepper Pots. They knew the Beatles. Like, it wasn't just an the Beatles knew about the Pepper Pots.
Yeah.
Because, and this is a well-known fact by many people, you could find this out from certain sources, but they played in the same clubs. Billy wasn't just a session artist. He also played with the Pepper Pots. And there's a photo, which I think I might have sent you it. It's a photo of Paul and Bill. I don't know if I sent you it, but it's a picture of Paul and Bill standing with each other, talking to each other.
Oh, you didn't send me that. Send me that.
Yeah.
Send that to me.
I'll send that to you. I had that photo, but Bill wasn't too known. It was kind of like how he was as popular as the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band. He wasn't too popular, but he was still kind of popular.
Yeah, so people who were in the music circles back then knew him.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, but he didn't have this raging popularity at the time. He even says this in Memoirs. He didn't have this raging popularity. And if he hadn't gotten the opportunity to step in and play Paul McCartney, he probably would be pretty much unknown today.
Like, I'd like to bring this up. Bill before Paul. It goes into what was his life like before Paul. Like, what I believe is that when Sgt. Pepper, the first time, it was 20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper was released 20 years after Aleister Crowley died, which was in the 40s. Billy Shepherd was born in 1937. I think between 1937 and 1947.
I think he was born in 1937 because he's 5 years older than biological.
Yeah, so it'd be 1937.
Right.
So something happened in between 47 and 37 that made him have to have been adopted by Albert, and that's why he hates Crowley. And then before he even began music, he was still a good musician. He just wasn't a session artist or anything. He just did it as a hobby. And then he became the policeman. And then after he quit the police force, he became a musician, Billy Pepper. And then, he became Phil Alco. And then he did Pepper Potts. And then he did Beatles.
Well, Aleister Crowley died in 1947. So 20 years ago today, when we talk about Sgt. Pepper being released in 1967, 20 years off of 1967 is 1947.
It was actually the same day, too. They released it the day he died.
Well, I think Crowley died on December 1st of 1947.
I looked up a thing on can't remember what site it was. You know how people make Wikipedia sites, but it's like they're called forums.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked on the forum, and one of my forum. I'll send you a link to that too. On a forum, it said that he died in June, and that's where I got that from. But I'll send you that too.
Okay, yeah,
that
send
has
that
some
to me.
Good information.
But in either case, whether it was the exact date, I mean, the year is. They are 20 years apart.
Yeah.
His death in 47 and the release of Sgt. Pepper in 1967.
But the police force thing, that was very incriminating for Bill, because Bill, since he had those records, what if someone found a picture? But it didn't matter at that point, since he was going to give the pictures to Phony, which Phony just released them anyway. He didn't care. But I would like to bring up that someone is in Bill's place right now. Bill has a double that plays Bill, and I will send you that photo. It's a picture of Billy Shepherd supposedly now, not as Paul, but now.
Yeah, send that to me, Nick. Send that to me. So you're saying he still has lookalikes and doubles filling in.
For him.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. I mean, I've tried to explain this to listeners, Nick, where the guy can't be Paul McCartney 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I mean, he's got to be himself. And so he can't be walking around playing his character all the time. So he needs to take a break. And so it just makes sense that in order for him to take a break, he has to have fill-ins.
And there's a picture of that, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, very good.
And the photo itself, it does look like Bill Shepherd, but it has the nose and chin and lips of Bill Shepherd, but it doesn't look that much like Bill Shepherd. It looks like a different guy.
Okay, yeah, send that to me. I would like to see it. I would like to see it.
And then I could send you a photo of the actual Bill Shepherd now when he's playing himself.
Yes, send all that stuff to me, and I'll put it into the show. Send everything to me.
And I'll send the video links and the forum links over Skype, and I'll send you over email, and then I'll send you the pictures over Skype.
Okay, very good. Very good.
All right.
Well, Nick, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. You did a great job. It's clear that you have done a lot of research. You know, there's not a lot of 16-year-olds out there that are doing this. A lot of 16-year-olds are just basically staring at their phones.
Well, when I stare at my phone, I stare at Paul's dead stuff. So
Yeah, sounds like it. All right. Well, you did a great job, Nick. And
all right, thank you.
I'll tell you what, you come back on the show whenever you want to talk about it some more, or you have some other information. You have my email. I mean, just email me and we'll get together again. Okay.
Yeah. And I would like to thank your audience for coming in and watching your show, and I'd like to thank people that would listen to my podcast, and I'd like to thank Thomas U. Harriet and Bill Shepard for providing the material necessary for these types of interviews. And that's all I have left to say. And I'd also like to thank you for having me on your show. It was really exciting.
Oh, no, anytime, Nick. I was excited to have you on. I really was. I knew it was going to be a very interesting conversation, talking to a young guy who's really knee-deep into this stuff, and I'm really happy that you're doing it. So I'm going to end the show here, Nick. Hang on for a second, okay? And we'll talk a little bit after we stop the recorder. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Hey there, brother, take a look around. Does it bother you that the world is upside down? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, sister, look out your door. Does it bother you when your child goes to war? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, neighbor, look to the sky. Does it bother you that your life is a lie? Can't you see? You're not free. I know you can be if you try. I know you can be if you try. Hey there, Father, standing in the rain. Does it bother you that you never took the blame? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, mother, time is passing by. Does it bother you if a child doesn't fly? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, stranger, have you lost your soul? Does it bother you when you don't even know? Can't you see? You're not free. I know you can be if you try. I know you can be if you try.